Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and sea to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
I've said that he killed himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
For those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place. A lot of people in molecular work's going. There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome, everyone, into Garden of Doom. And this week it's a little bit Dickensian, and that's a tale of two Jeffreys. My guest is Jeffrey from Metatrack, and as you know, I'm Jeff also. So I'm Jeff, he's Jeffrey. Since we're the only ones talking to each other, we probably don't need to use our first names, but that'll be your clue other than our voices. So Jeffrey has a YouTube channel called Metatrack, and as you might infer from the name, it's about Star Trek. More than that, he really does deep dives into the episodes of Star Trek. He found episodes of Star Trek that showed that the Wrath of Khan was really supposed to be about the Romulans and not the Klingons, and all sorts of inconsistencies. It's almost like a respectful way of doing a little bit of Mystery Science 3000, but more like a pitch meeting or the Critical Drinker, where you point out silly things in the TV shows or the movies that maybe other people would have missed or less picky people would have missed, but not me, especially those of you who follow me on Facebook and see my reviews. I'm all about that stuff. So without any further ado, Jeffrey, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you. So listen, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, as much as your biography as you like to give, and what took you to this place where you started doing the Metatrack YouTube.
So I've been a lifelong fan of Star Trek, and as long as I can remember, I've been watching the TV show. I think I probably cut my teeth on the animated series that was a Saturday morning show back when I was probably 3 or 4.
I remember that.
Yeah.
There was Planet of the Apes. There was Star Trek. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like one of those Mandela effects. Until you meet someone else who saw it, you're not quite sure it was real.
And later Tarzan and some other shows. It turns out that
Tarzan Isis Hour.
Yeah. And Star Trek was the earliest of those shows. So if you notice that the sound effects and music sounded alike, it was because it was actually created for the Star Trek animated series and then reused in probably all of their other ones later. And just, I fell in love with Star Trek at a young age. I understood it. It really spoke to me, and it just has never gone away. And I know I wouldn't be here where I am today if it wasn't for Star Trek. Just like the world we live in, I believe that the world wouldn't be as it is today without it as well. And probably about 15 or 20 years ago, I was really getting into Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces. And as I was reading the book and thinking about the stories that he was using to illustrate his ideas, I kept thinking, I bet you could do a version of this book using modern science fiction and fantasy instead of ancient mythology and fairy tales. And I kept pondering that. And then I finally decided, well, what if I tried to write that book myself? And once I started down that process, I quickly realized that Star Trek itself is a fully formed mythology.
Absolutely.
In fact, of all of the potential franchises that could be a modern mythology, Star Trek seemed to have all of the ingredients required to be a fully functional mythology. So with that in mind, my book quickly became about Star Trek itself as a mythology. And the YouTube channel was conceived of as a platform to create it, to attract an audience to, so I could get this book published. But it quickly took on a life of its own. I haven't worked on the book much since I've been doing the channel, and I've really been enjoying that a lot. So if the book ever does come out, I think it'll be probably more like a companion to the YouTube channel than the other way around.
There's a lot of Star Trek fans out there, many generations. Some of the biggest Star Trek fans I know are half my age, which is crazy. See, I'm of that age where, yes, I remember the cartoon you're speaking of, but where I was just old enough that Leonard Nimoy, to me, was the guy from In Search Of. Then I stumbled upon Star Trek. I'm like, hey, that's the guy from In Search Of. And like my father laughed at me like, no, that's Mr. Spock. He's the guy from Star Trek, not In Search Of. That's a new thing. And I'm like, how's that work? Now, of course, it's, you see Ed O'Neill on Modern Family. And of course, a new person would say, and they'd stumble upon Married with Children and go, wait, is that guy? Yeah, but, to me,
yeah.
It's Bundy.
My experience is actually just the opposite, because I remember watching In Search Of when it was first airing, and every week I just couldn't get over how different Leonard Nimoy looked without his Spock ears and without his particular haircut.
Right.
So I could recognize him as Spock, but he just always looked weird when he was in Search Of.
He still favored his father, though. Looks-wise, or his TV father. Yeah, I mean, speak about two of the formative shows of my youth, the same guy being in both of them.
Yeah. It was kind of neat that the guy that played Spock in the trilogy of movies they made about a decade ago, Zachary Quintos, I think is his name.
Yeah,
he revived In Search Of as well. They did like a season of it, so that was kind of neat that he took on two of Nimoy's landmark roles.
Yeah, I do want to get a little bit into the movies to see if you feel the same way about them as the TV show, both from the Joseph Campbell hero's journey arc and just generally how you feel, and if you find major differences between the different TV shows as compared. I mean, obviously, the obvious one is Voyager can be the Odyssey. That's sort of the
absolutely
the obvious one. But
yep.
Is Deep Space Nine Camelot-ish? Maybe a little bit. So anyway, you're the expert in this, so I want to let you do most of the leading with it. So why don't you take the best? If you use Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and by the way, you can. I mean, we've talked about a bunch on this show, but you can certainly put it into your words, what it means to you or how you would define it, because I get a little bit caught up in the mythology and trying to track things to the Indo-European and this and that and the other thing. Mm-hmm. This show, I think, we should stick to, maybe a more modern construct. Maybe not, we'll see. But yeah, in your own words, and then, see where you first sort of caught that connection and which show or project you applied it to first.
Sure. So as far as the hero's journey goes, it's a three-part journey. There's the going out into the world or leaving the familiar world and entering into what Campbell called the special world, where you encounter mysterious forces, supernatural forces, things that you're not familiar with. While you're there, you undergo some kind of a trial. Often you'll be dismembered or even killed and then resurrected as part of that trial. And then you return home with a boon for your people. And that boon is something that is realized in the trial itself. Usually, but it's all, for me, it's all metaphoric for going inward and meeting with yourself and dredging something out of your own unconscious that perhaps no one else in your generation has realized, and bringing that to your people and having a transformative effect on the world.
This is a little bit off subject, but a little bit on subject, if the answer is yes. Did you watch The Last of Us?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, then it's sort of irrelevant. Because I don't want to spoil anything, but at the end, there's a the protagonist, I don't want to say hero or not, and they make a choice, and it's being hailed. And it is very much the opposite of sort of the lesson that everybody hailed 2 generations ago in Star Trek II, when Wrath of Khan, where Spock famously says, and you put it in your videos twice, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, of course, a lot. And I'm wondering if that's not symbolic of sort of the change of generations, and if that's not, part of, I'm not sure if we've grown or we've gotten more selfish. I don't know, but I guess maybe you'll come back after you've watched it and we'll talk about it again.
Sure, I do plan to watch it. I just haven't had the chance to yet. Yeah. So the first season is complete?
It's complete. Yeah, I think there are only 9 episodes, so it's
okay.
So it's about 9 hours. They're not all one of them's much longer, but most of them, like the finale was like 38 minutes.
Is it going to be a continuing series, or is it just one season?
I think it's done really well for HBO, so I can't imagine that they won't, unless the situation with Discovery Warner Brothers is worse than everyone's letting on, which I don't know what can be worse than we owe $50 billion. So, but
it sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, but I think a hit series is a hit series, and I think HBO is sort of self-funding. So, I mean, they definitely do departmentalize the networks. I say definitely, but 98% they departmentalize the networks. They each have their own budget and income and things like that. 2%, I have no idea what I'm talking about. All right, let's get back to Star Trek then, because that little interesting tidbit. I probably should have asked you in pre-production, but honestly, it didn't even come to me until moments ago. All right, so let's start with when you were watching Star Trek. When did it hit you, or what did you immediately think of when you're like, Joseph Campbell said this. This is how I interpret it. Wait a minute, that's Kirk. That's Spock, or this is the whole mythos. I mean, obviously, going out of your world is space, but I don't know. Maybe that is a comfort zone for if you're in Starfleet. Maybe it's going to all these other planets, or maybe it's a new hero's journey every time.
One thing about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey that I like to stress is that it is only a part of a mythology.
Sure.
And there's all kinds of other aspects to it. It's an important part, but in Star Trek, it's sort of interesting because the original series started mid hero's journey already. There was no opening episode where it was Kirk being called to join Starfleet or even his captaincy. That was already in progress, and that was most likely because of the way that TV was done back then. They wanted episodes that could be played in any order, so you couldn't really have a definitive beginning episode, and they didn't really give finales either. They just every episode was sort of a variant on a theme, really. So the broader arc of the original Star Trek, you really started to see some of those pieces that weren't there in the original series fall into place. And I have to say that Mr. Spock is the character that seems to follow the hero's journey most closely. And you have every facet of the hero's journey represented by him, including the death and resurrection. And you have other examples of death and resurrection in Star Trek, including Kirk has a couple of times where he dies and comes back. So that is part of the hero's journey. But in a major sense, it was really Spock seems to follow the whole arc of the hero's journey.
It's interesting because he's the one who survived into the next series. I mean, they all sort of did, but he's the continuous one. It's also interesting because so then by that, Kirk would be sort of the warrior that the hero recruits to help him. Whether it's the storm god or the god of war, or the big sidekick that he gets to help him.
There you go.
Kirk, even though Kirk appears to be the lead, maybe he isn't. That Spock was lead. Yeah, I mean his evolution is very interesting. Though in Star Trek with the chronology thing, every now and then they let it slip when they had a popular character like Harry Mudd. They would bring him back every so often. But I know what you're saying. It was I forgot.
They had Harry Mudd back twice. Once in the second season of the original series called I'm Mudd, and then again in the animated series called Mudd's Passion, which was kind of a variant of Mudd's Women, in that he had a type of aphrodisiac that he was trying to peddle. But as far as Kirk being the main character, that was the intent from the beginning, was that it was the captain of a ship and his adventures with his crew. However, Spock's character became very popular very quickly, and by the second season, they realized that they had to pretty much just pair the two of them up all the time. They were almost always together, and that's because they were essentially almost like doppelgangers. Actually, there's something to that where they're two halves of a whole, and when they were together, things were great. And the producers realized when they split the two of them up, which they did in a couple of episodes. First one, I believe, was Galileo 7, where Spock and McCoy and Scotty were marooned on a planet. They had crashed in a shuttlecraft, and Kirk was on the Enterprise, and they realized they felt that didn't work as well dramatically because the two of them weren't together. But I talked about Kirk undergoing some death and resurrections himself. The first episode of the second season, it's called Amok Time. Kirk undergoes a death and resurrection at the hands of Spock. And I've always felt that was sort of a ritualistic way of aligning Kirk with the fact that he wasn't the only main character. So I see death and resurrection in stories as being a way of resetting a character. A character has there's a major shock, a major revelation. The character, in order to make that a part of himself, has to kind of go offline and come back online, sort of like a computer. When you update a computer, the update doesn't take hold until you shut the computer down and then restart it.
Yeah.
So a death and resurrection, I think, you could use that as a metaphor of a computer restarting. And I've always looked at Spock killing Kirk and Kirk coming back. And you'll see, too, that there was a transformation in Spock at that time, because that's the first time that you really see Spock smile.
Right.
Of his own accord.
That's interesting that you brought that up because, a couple things, in the Joseph Campbell archetype, there's usually a guide or a magician or something. And Spock's also sort of that, but so is Bones, and sometimes there's other aliens. I mean, Star Trek, because the cast was so large, is you have different characters sometimes switching roles and being an amalgam. But I also think that bear with me on this one. Back in the older mythologies, lots of them, there's death, resurrection, ascension, which brought the hero to godhood, making it further from man. But, as we get closer, most notably Jesus Christ, the whole reason for Jesus being here was to die for our sins and then try and leave the Holy Ghost to us, but to bring God, even the Old Testament God, who, listen, he's a bit of a dick. And, give the Old Testament God, bring him closer to man, reunite with man, and then he ascends, believes the Holy Spirit there. And so you sort of have the resurrection as bringing God closer to man, as opposed to taking a man and ascending him to God. I don't know how deep this is, but a few years ago, a friend of mine told me the difference between DC and Marvel is that in Marvel, you have men who sometimes have to act like gods, and in DC, you have gods who are sometimes trying to act like men.
Interesting. I like that.
I liked it too. It hit me like a ton of bricks, I have to tell you. Like you, Troy, you know where you are and who you are. Anyway, so I want to know if you have any, if you have any takes on who was the magician. The damsel in distress wasn't. Sometimes you had the nurse, then there was the who was sort of in love with Kirk, and then you have Uhura, who was sort of in love with Kirk, but then I think the nurse was also sort of in love with Spock, and they were routinely women of different colors and arms and eyes and whatever that Kirk was with. But the magician, the magician or the guide, sometimes was very different.
Yep. Those are all really great points, and I would say the magician is actually bifurcated in Star Trek, and it's the two guys that wear the blue shirts. It's McCoy and Spock. One of them, I would say Spock is more like a sorcerer magician. He and McCoy would be like a shaman. And the difference between the two being that one draws energy down from above, let's say, and the other one pulls it up from below. And McCoy being the shaman, he would be the one that pulls things up from below. He's more of a underworld figure, and they both are guides for Kirk. And people often will relate them to the two aspects that Kirk has to choose between, logic and emotion, and Kirk being often defined as the decider. But that's true. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've always felt that identifying Kirk as the decider in that scenario was the wrong category. You were sort of like if you do a IQ test or a logic test where you've got to group things together. Decider doesn't group well with logic and emotion. It doesn't pair up. So I think what Kirk represents actually is intuition. And if you follow the logic of the chain of command, what that tells you is that intuition trumps both logic and emotion. And intuition may be our oldest sense, or don't want to call it emotion, but I think it's Carl Jung that said that intuition is the human instinct.
Yeah,
it's our version of instinct. So, and instinct, of course, would have to be the oldest and most primal sense that we have, that creatures have.
Well, that's Kirk's origin story. I mean, he wasn't really supposed to be there, and he sort of cheated on the test, but he's the only one who passed it. Was it the Kobayashi Maru?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he was.
By the way, it was in one of your videos, but it wasn't a test. It was like a region or a ship or something in Romulan space. I don't know if the test was named after that, but
it was. Okay. It was the name of a ship. Yeah, and the video I went into how originally that was supposed to be the Romulan neutral zone that the Kobayashi Maru was stranded in, and it was originally going to be the Romulans that came to challenge the Enterprise. But at some point, they made a decision that they wanted to reuse the to save money, they wanted to reuse the special effects from the first movie, and they had a fleet of Klingon ships in the first one. So they went ahead and just changed the Romulans to Klingons. They didn't even change some of the other details to try to cover that up. So, and what I was pointing out was that the Wrath of Khan has quite like 11, I think it's 11 parallels with the Balance of Terror, the first season episode, to the point where it either consciously or unconsciously, they had just watched all of the original series before they started to work on Star Trek II, the new producers, so they could get up to speed with Star Trek, because they hadn't really watched it apparently before that. And I have a feeling that it left an unconscious or perhaps conscious impression on them. Hard to say which. Part of it had to have been conscious, probably, because they used planet names and things that, from the episode. So yeah, it was kind of neat. That it's sort of neat to see the workings of these stories and see how the different pressures that they has effects on how the story evolves and changes and becomes what we know it as.
Now, it's funny that they remembered certain things, like the part of some unknown beam, like a rectangular or triangular piece of column that fell on and killed the second in command of both episodes. Yet they didn't remember that, in fact, the Romulans were using Klingon-designed ships. So they didn't have to change anything. But if they didn't, now let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they did it on purpose and did the world a favor, because we got away from Klingons in, deep brown blackface and got the high ridged, bony, skulled version of the Klingons now, which is a much cooler and much more iconic image, as well as being, more progressive, I suppose. I mean, if you really think the color of a Klingon's face should matter, I mean, that they're an alien. But in any event, it's, I think that the half Klingon, half human Worf and the full Klingons like Gowron and whatever, I think the imagery of it is much more, a much scarier image and much more memorable.
Yeah, much more alien. I do agree. I like the way the Klingons looked after Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Well, actually, they were different there. If you look, there's actually almost like three different
there's
races or types. Yeah, types of Klingons. Yeah, in the motion picture, they only had a ridge down the middle of their head, which actually looked a lot like the mutants in one of Gene Roddenberry's unsold pilots. I think it was either Earth 2 or no, I mean I think Genesis 2. There was another one called Planet Earth. If you look at those, you'll see there's almost the exact same makeup. So that was kind of interesting. But the what they call like the turtle head Klingons, those started in Star Trek III, the search for Spock. I have to say though, although like I said, I totally agree with those are cool looking. There's a certain symmetry, I think, in the original series that was lost when they changed the Klingons to make them look less human. And in the original series, you had two hero races. You had the humans and the Vulcans. And then you had two villain races that were sort of like shadow aspects of the humans and the Vulcans, the Romulans and the Klingons. And so, like I said, I felt like there was a certain symmetry to the Klingons looking human and the Romulans looking Vulcan that was sort of lost after the original series.
True enough, though they did give us a bunch of different characters later on, the Ferengi and the Bajorans and the oh my God, I keep wanting to say the Kardashians, which is a different kind of alien.
Oops.
Yeah,
Cardassians. Yeah.
Cardassians, right? It's the S, not the Sh.
Yeah.
And others. I forgot who the Dominion soldiers were, but basically they were supposed to be super soldiers, but they were basically like, stormtroopers from Star Wars, except with stronger. Anyway, so I don't know if this is fair to do, but of the different Prime series, so we have Star Trek Original, Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. I know there's been a bunch since there was Discovery, there's Picard, Lower Decks, and there's been probably Enterprise. and there's, all the movies, including the more recent ones, which had an origin story, which I actually thought the first one was really good. They sort of dropped off from there. But which series do you equate most to any particular mythologies or stories? If it's possible to do so with the entirety of a series, or, if there's Deep Space Nine was seems to me was these 4 famous stories.
I think the original series maps onto the Greek mythology really well. And I also can see some correlations between that and what I would consider to be the Christian mythology, with the triumvirate from Star Trek. The main 3 characters, they map onto the Trinity real well, I feel. And the Next Generation, I really feel maps onto Egyptian mythology really well.
Oh, elaborate.
Well, I'll give you one prime example. The Crushers. Beverly is, I'd say, very much like Isis. She's a goddess of healing and of the underworld. As well, if we get into it, I'll go into how the doctors and the sickbay is Star Trek's representation of the underworld. And she has a son who everyone seems to hate because of how perfect he was and how all-knowing he was. He was very much like Horus, with his eye open. And then the third figure in that family would be Jack Crusher, who was dead, who was very much like Osiris. So you've got a dead father, a healing magician wife, and a son whose eye is open and he can see what's happening. So are you familiar with the Eye of Horus, that concept?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yep.
He lost his eye battling. What was it, when Set went crazy?
Yeah, Set tried to, what he did, let's see.
He killed Osiris.
Set killed Osiris, which, if you think about it, if Picard is truly responsible for Jack's death, wouldn't that sort of make him a Set character in a sense? But
but Horus, like Marduk and a few others, said, "I'll do it, but then I become your king." I don't know that Wesley ever got there, but hey, maybe one day.
Maybe, yeah, yep. I suppose there's still stories to be told, but with Horus, I believe he went into the underworld and gave his eye to his father, with the idea being that when a king gets old and decrepit and his vision starts to fail or he becomes willfully blind, it's the younger generation that helps to give him sight.
Right. Yeah, it's like his eye turned to jade or something like that.
Yeah.
Once it was dislodged by whatever Set's weapon was. It's hard. There's so many different mythologies to give.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of eyes going. Odin with his eye, a little bit.
Yeah, you see that a lot. Kirk with his eye. I did an episode or a video about the symbology of Kirk's broken glasses, and that his one lens was cracked at the end of Star Trek II, and I didn't go into the connections with the other mythological gods, but it's definitely, I believe it's the eye, it's the right eye that's always missing, and I think it's the right one.
It was the right one. I watched it yesterday, so I remember.
Okay. Sometimes I forget.
Right, and it was a representation of Spock dying, and that's sort of why the glasses never broke during any of the many, many scenes where they could have broke. They sort of broke on their own. It was sort of like part of, Kirk's heart breaking in the form of symbolic in his lens.
Very much so, yeah. And also, too, I didn't bring this up in the video, but I also relate it to the Spock's death to the death of Christ. And when Christ died, the veil was torn in two, which was supposed to be symbolic of, I guess, the spirit, God's spirit going out into the world, leaving the tabernacle, but it's still that same idea. Something was broken of its own accord. Why did the veil tear? How did the veil tear? It did it of its own accord, just like Kirk's glasses did the moment that Spock died.
Yeah, sometimes things are just preordained.
Yeah.
Out of the void comes chaos and order battling one way or another, and there's always an afterglow or a side effect of that. That's always maybe. All right, so we have Greek for the original series. We have Egyptian for the Next Generation. I guess Deep Space Nine comes next.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about Deep Space Nine particularly. All this stuff is so dense and thick, and there's so much to consider that Deep Space Nine had never really gotten that far. But I love what you said, that it would be like a Camelot. I can see that, and part of what I think is so cool about that is whether or not you believe this or subscribe to this kind of a conspiracy theory that Deep Space Nine was actually a ripoff of Babylon 5, which there seems to be plenty of evidence in favor of that, including Straczynski going to Paramount like the year before they started working on Deep Space Nine and pitching Babylon 5. But in Babylon 5, he makes all these connections between Babylon 5 and Camelot. So it would make sense if that follows, even if it doesn't follow, that Deep Space Nine would be a version of Camelot as well. So I think that's pretty neat.
5 doesn't even try to hide it. I mean, they had an episode where Michael York thought he was King Arthur, and then somebody said, "You don't think he's King Arthur?" After he disappeared mysteriously. And then the Vorlon ambassador, Kosh, comes by and goes, "You're telling me that's not Merlin?" But there was a resurrection as well in Babylon. Anyway, I did a deep dive Babylon 5 episode. So for those of you who are interested, including our guests, please check it out. And also one on the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. I'm sort of really proud about both of those shows.
Check them out. I like both. I like the reboot of Battlestar Galactica better than the original. I hate to say that because I'm very partial to the original, having watched it as a child when it first aired. And I was very taken by it, by the epicness of it and the mythology of it and all of that.
Oh, sure. I mean, and there's, I feel like I should rewatch the original also. I mean, I didn't realize at the time that Iblis, I knew it, I just thought it would sound like evil, but I know Iblis was actually the name for basically it was like the Islamic or Arabic word for basically Azazel or
the devil. Yeah.
The devil, yeah. And that episode with Count, there were two with Count Iblis, and you knew once they went into that star cluster or that big, basically Death Star thing, all white and all their uniforms turned white, it was supposed to make you think it was angelic in heaven, but you knew it was a swerve. I mean, so
that was really neat. And then there's a scene where they try to kill Iblis or Ibli, and they shoot him, and he turns for a moment into a demonic figure.
Right, exactly.
That's pretty neat.
Instead of his genteel old British man looking, that was the guy from the Avengers, not the MCU version, but the old British, sort of spy police show. Anyway, yeah.
And one other thing too about that, I don't know if you caught it or not, but there's a scene. Well, Count Iblis says that he'll deliver their enemy unto them, and in short order, Baltar is brought to the Galactica. He's brought in front of the Council of the 12 and Iblis, and when he hears Iblis talk, he says, "Your voice, it sounds familiar." He couldn't place it. Do you remember that?
I do.
The actor who played him, Patrick McNee? I think.
Yes, that's him.
Yeah, he did the voice for the Imperious leader of the Cylons.
Right.
And the idea there being that he had something to do with them attacking humanity,
right.
He was really
playing both ends.
Yeah, there you go, against the middle.
Yeah, anything to get more souls or whatever he was up to. Yeah, I think I really need to watch the original series if I could put up with the kid and that stupid robot dog. But
they phased him out. I think halfway through. Yeah,
but the damage was done.
Sure.
To me, maybe not to the show. But yeah, very cool stuff. And hey, maybe you'll start doing videos on Battlestar Galactica at some point.
I'd like to, because they really go into astrology. The 12 colonies are very much the 12 signs of the zodiac.
Right.
And then there's always been a lost 13th sign of the zodiac, which ties into one of the Star Trek episodes in a very interesting way. But
the Serpent Bear.
Yeah.
You wonder why that actually one got kicked out.
Yeah, it's I think the idea was that the plane of the galaxy changed, and it actually went out of the plane of the zodiac, or something like that. My wife could explain that much better than I could. But anyways, they make Earth out to be the lost 13th tribe, the lost 13th colony. So that was kind of neat.
Yeah, well, in the new Battlestar Galactica, that's sort of what they did too. But then they found out that I don't know, they got a little bit muddled at the end. But for anyone who hasn't watched it, I recommend it. It's on HBO Max. But if you don't want to, check out the episode of Garden of Doom, and both are with Matt Williams, who's a space journalist, science fiction writer, and podcaster as well. He works on the Astronomy Cast with Fraser Kane and Dr. Pamela Gay. So I'm propping shows that don't even know I exist. But anyway, so all right, so Deep Space Nine, you sort of like my Camelot analogy. It's probably more complex than that, maybe even a little bit of Troy thrown in there, and but definitely a city on the hill trying to marshal opposing forces and unite them against whatever come my way. And then of course it became an external threat, which is was part of Arthur, but Arthur also had the internal threat. But nothing's exactly the same. And there were lots of internal threats. I mean, there were spies in Deep Space Nine, and there was the Bajorans were always sort of cast out, and whatever the shape shifting the holy ones. The guy was head of security, Rene. I can't say it. He was from Benston or whatever. What were they? What were they called? What was their race?
They were the. What were they? The Founders, I think.
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
Yeah, he wasn't even sure that he exactly was one, and then he realized he was. But then, they were Cardassian spies, and the Klingons were going to have a civil war, and so he's always trying to put things together. So, all right, we'll go with Camelot on that one. All right, with Voyager, I said the Odyssey. That seems obvious. It seems too obvious. But is there anything else, or was it really just the Odyssey?
It was the Odyssey, I'd say. And the original series would be like the Iliad. I think you could probably say the Next Generation, because the Next Generation was, essentially a remake, a redo of the original series.
Yeah,
in so many ways, more than any of the other series. So, where the Odyssey, of course, is the voyage home, the Iliad was the voyage going out away from home. And interestingly enough, the first planet that they go to in the original series was called Talos 4. And Talos was also the name of the Iron Giant, I believe. That
he was.
That Odysseus meets on his first, the first island they come to, the first stop. So almost like there was a nod to that.
Yeah, though, for those of you who remember Jason and the Argonauts, the Harryhausen graphics, the Talos was on that as well, but they gave him like an Achilles heel like thing where if you took out the latch, and all the sand came out of him, and then of course the living robot no longer could fight. But yeah, that's right, the Talos, indeed. Now, in going back a little bit to the Next Generation, I mean, in that you had lots of characters who sort of played the wizard, and arguably you could have lots of characters who played Spock, but I always thought that Data and LaForge were sort of, between the two of them, they sort of became Spock, and to a certain extent Picard also, because Riker was half Kirk, as much as Picard was. But there was also, was it Q? Was that the guy who kept coming in and out and sometimes giving good advice, sometimes giving bad advice?
Yeah, he was their godlike, like a mentor trickster character.
Right. Sometimes he was Odin and sometimes he was Loki.
Yeah.
Or just Odin being a dick. I mean, a lot of these father gods are dickish, especially the older ones. They're, you know, they're sometimes they're just plain disinterested, and other times they're, you know, they want to be venerated and worshipped, and sometimes they'll stoop to no levels, you know, to get their way.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring the two of them up together. Because of Marvel, we have this idea that Loki is a brother to Thor, but in the actual original legends or, you know, mythology, he was Odin's brother.
Oh yeah,
and which I find that to be interesting in itself, and I've kind of formulated a kind of a mythological pattern to that whole thing, and how he's moving down through the generations and kind of maintaining himself, where Odin grew old and eventually, you know, dissipated. And here he is, now he's, you know, Thor's brother instead of Odin's brother, and still young and healthy, and ever the trickster. And, but, you know, that's something now, you know,
something you're working on. Something you're toying with.
Yeah.
All right. So after Voyager, I don't know if you want to count the prequel, which is Enterprise, or you want to go into... See, this is sort of where I lose track of the new shows, because there were just so many. I saw a season of Discovery. I probably saw some Enterprise, but I mean, probably lost me right around, you know, probably right around Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Actually, originally, I think I only watched the first couple seasons of Deep Space Nine. I told myself at the time, I'll come back in 20 years and watch it. And right on that timeline, my wife and we watched it probably about 9-10 years ago, which was about 20 years after it came out. So it was kind of coincidental. Same thing with Voyager. I watched like the first season or two seasons, and stopped watching that. And then with Enterprise as well. I think I watched like the first season and then stopped watching it. Again, all of these since then, my wife and I have gone through and watched all of them together. And I really liked Enterprise. I felt it was a better show than Voyager, and I probably liked it better than Deep Space Nine as well. But it's funny because after Voyager, and starting with Enterprise, they've only been prequels. I think the only concurrent one that I can think of, I haven't seen Prodigy. I guess Prodigy might have continued into the future, I suppose. But Lower Decks, it's like the two animated new series seems to continue into the future. Of course, Discovery did jump into the future, but it's interesting that Star Trek sort of stopped progressing forward and went back in time, which was sort of the opposite of what its original intent was, which was to depict a future.
I saw the first season of Discovery, and I thought it was okay. There were parts of it I really liked, but then I don't know. I think CBS aired it during COVID because they had no new programming, and I never felt the need to. But I wasn't really buying the whole warp thing was based on like giant space tardigrades being able to, have a connection with like sort of dark matter or space dust throughout the almost like the like fungi have communication or like a
network.
So that seemed a little bit silly to me, but I like Jason Isaacs. I like Michelle Yeoh. Everyone likes Michelle Yeoh.
Oh yeah,
I like the
actors are great. The actors are great. The show, in my opinion, not so much.
Yeah. I heard that there was a big drop off, and I think it's been canceled. But I've never seen an episode of Picard, but my understanding is that he's bringing parts of the crew back, and that it must be moving forward at least past Next Generation.
Yeah, that one too, I guess, does progress into the future. You're right. Discovery and Picard, I've watched the first 5 episodes of both and couldn't take either one of them anymore. I had to stop. And
I heard that Picard was not good, but people are talking highly about this particular last season. I think that the producers know that what they made before was a stinko and wanted to give people a good taste. Let Patrick Stewart's presumably last Star Trek role, and a lot of these actors, go out on a good note. I want to get to the movies though, and if you see any particular different arcs in the first, basically the William Shatner versions to the ones where they transition to Picard, and then the more recent Chris Pine ones, if you see any particular ties to mythology in those movies, and if there was any difference in the one sort of Kirk-headed versus Picard-headed versus, new Kirk-headed, young Chris Pine Kirk-headed.
Sure. The original 6 movies, I think there's some really good hero's journey moments for Spock. Again, his death at the end of Star Trek II, his resurrection in Star Trek III. Those were both
with the
very, very mythological.
Yeah.
And also, too, interestingly enough, they did that trilogy, essentially an unintended, unplanned trilogy, 2, 3, and 4. And 4, of course, was the comedy. And that actually goes right in line with the idea of the death and resurrection. A resurrection story is a comedy in the Greek sense, that they had two types of stories: tragedies, which ended badly, and comedies, which ended, which had a happy ending. That's why when I realized that too, that's why I figured out like romantic comedies. Whenever I would watch them, I'd always think, this isn't really that funny. Why do they call them a comedy? And it's telling you in the title that it's going to end well, that they're going to be together at the end. So at any rate, ending with a comedy was the perfect ending for that trilogy, because it was truly a comedy. It was a happy ending. So they really, either knowingly or unknowingly, hit the mark by ending it like that. Star Trek V, I feel, puts at least one piece in the hero's journey arc for Spock. It shows his birth, especially if you want to correlate it to the life of Christ, where you essentially have a birth scene, and it was in a cave with Spock, which is actually more of a Mithric type of birth scene. Mithras was a forerunner to Christ, and he was born in a cave, and then
under a star before 3 wise men.
All that, yeah, it's all pretty ubiquitous. Then let's see.
What about Star Trek: The Motion Picture? I mean, that seems to me like it was probably a tragedy in that it ended with a thud. I mean, it's almost like the Odyssey, but it's almost like the Grail quest without finding the Grail.
Yeah, they. Let's see, that it has a special place, I think, in the canon. It's sort of a standalone movie in a standalone time period. It was the only live-action Star Trek from the 70s that we got, too. So that was kind of neat. As far as the storyline goes, though, it is a story of a birth, really. The birth of a new type of being, part man, part alien, part machine. And it almost was like, in a sense, there was almost an alchemical story happening here, with these different influences coming in a sequence of different events that sort of all lead to the culmination of this new, almost godlike. Well, I guess you could say that Decker reached apotheosis when he merged with V'ger. And
is it the same Decker from the original series that was supposed to be Pike's number 1?
So this Decker was actually it's supposed to be Matt Decker from the original series, his son. There was an original series episode called The Doomsday Machine, where there's a Commodore named Matt Decker who sacrifices himself at the end, just like his son does. But they were father and son. Now, the Decker in the movie was actually a forerunner to Riker in the Next Generation. I did a video about this. My second video I did talked about how the Star Trek: The Motion Picture was actually the end result of a canceled television series from the late 70s. And they had Decker, Ilea, and another character that didn't make it into the motion picture. His name was Zahn. Those three characters were the basis for Riker, Troy, and Data. And Decker and Riker, their names are pretty similar. It's Willard Deckard and William Riker. So they kept the names similar. Now Troy and Ilea, their names don't sound anything alike. However, if you look up what Ilea means, it actually means Troy.
Ilium, right?
So it's kind of, yeah. Ilea, Iliad. Ilea is just Iliad without the D.
Yeah.
And I talk about that in the video as well. So it also is a part of the groin. It's a bone in the groin, which is kind of interesting. She was supposed to be a very sexual character from a sexual race.
Well, also, wasn't she Diana Troy, and Diana is Artemis?
Yes,
a goddess
absolutely.
of many properties. And wasn't Artemis Achilles' mom as well?
I think so. I'd have to look into it to be sure, but
yeah, I don't think it ties into Star Trek necessarily, but it's just, but yeah, she was the goddess of the hunt, I think of the moon, and the moon and female is often associated, and Troy was an empath.
Yeah.
So
just like,
he wasn't very good at it.
No. She pretty much told Kirk or Picard exactly what, it was pretty obvious and everyone could tell anyway. He didn't really need to be an empath to sense what she was sensing, unfortunately. Right. But, Ilea was an empath as well, I think, or had abilities like that. She was, and they said too, if that had gone into series, that the way that they were working on the scripts, that she was transitioning into somewhat of a counselor-like character as well.
That's right. Well, Troy, unfortunately, I think the empathy worked against her, and that got her all worked up a lot. So got distracted. So anyway, enough about Troy. So all right. So what do you think about the new arc? With I actually liked the reboot. I thought the casting was wonderful. I thought Chris Pine was good. The ending was there, but it was mostly world building, reminding us of the world, bringing us the characters, the crew, the camaraderie. I'm not sure how I felt about Spock meeting Spock, but aside from that, what did you think of it? And do you think that it represents a different mythology, a different arc than the original Star Trek, because it did take us to Jim Kirk's origin back in Iowa?
Oh boy. I feel like we have some opposing views on that movie.
That's okay.
I said leaving the theater. Is it okay if I swear?
Sure. I'll just put the explicit tab on it.
Okay. Leaving the theater, I said I hated every fucking frame of that movie. And my friend that was with me, he got a good chuckle because he took a look at me and he said, "You look like somebody just shot your dog." He said, which I always thought was a funny thing. No, I didn't like it at all.
Not at all, huh?
And no, I again hated every frame of that. I was seething the whole way through.
The third movie, I could say the third movie was abysmal. The second movie was just like a summer movie. I remember seeing it in Iron Man 3 like a week apart and feeling I saw the same movie twice.
Yeah, it's funny because so I saw the first one only once in the theater. Refused to watch it again. By the time the second one had come around, I had changed my perspective a little bit, and I started to sort of look at it as a Gold Key comic made into a movie. So the Gold Key comics of Star Trek were very loosely based on the TV show. There was a lot of inconsistencies. They would get even the colors of their shirts wrong on the covers, and they weren't very Star Trek like. They had the facade of Star Trek, but that was about it. And I felt that movie, when it was time for that movie to come out, I had started to look at these new movies as something like that. And so we actually went to see that one twice. It was the only one I saw twice. We went to see the third one. Couldn't wait for that one to be over. And I think we tried to watch it again on cable and watched, I don't know, a half hour of it and just said we just couldn't do it. We ended up just turning it off. I've never rewatched that movie altogether. But I have to say, after getting the emotional, baggage out of the way and looking at Star Trek 2009 from a more logical or let's say mythological perspective, I did see something in it that I found to be interesting. There's actually a couple of things in there that I thought were pretty interesting. One, it was, despite it being, in my opinion, a bad movie and they could have had a much better story, it actually did progress Spock's mythological journey to its logical conclusion. Again, based on the story of Christ. If you think about what happened with Christ, after his death and resurrection, he had a bodily ascension into obviously a higher realm of existence. He bodily ascended into heaven, right? So even though there was a considerable amount of time between Spock's death and resurrection and his bodily ascent, that's essentially what happens in this movie.
Yeah.
He leaves the known universe and goes into another a universe really of his own creation, if you think about it. However, there was a devil figure or an adversarial figure that also impacted and influenced the creation of this new timeline, this new universe. That was Nero, who, of course, biblically speaking, most scholars think that he was the beast in Revelations. The 666 is the number of a man, and it actually turns out to be, it equates to Nero's name.
Oh, okay.
Numerologically. So you have that, this ascension into another realm. So I thought it was kind of cool once I, really looked at it. The other thing I found to be interesting is starting with Enterprise, they really made the Vulcans into, this could be part of the hero's journey. So it's kind of a neat, I think, connection here. They made the Vulcans into a mentor race for humanity, starting with Enterprise. They really leaned heavy on that. And as you were saying earlier, how Spock was sort of a guide for Kirk, that's very true. He was supposed to be his indigenous guide out in space, sort of like Tonto to the Lone Ranger kind of idea. He was his native guide. And sewn away as a guide, that's sort of a mentor figure. But here's something interesting, I think. Once they turned the Vulcan race into a mentor race for humanity, in 3 different films, Vulcan is destroyed, and one of them being Star Trek 2009. Now, how that relates to the hero's journey is that at some point, the mentor has to die for the hero to progress. And so, again, in Enterprise, the Vulcans become the mentors to humanity. And then you have actually 2 fan films, Star Trek New Voyages, which they changed their name to Star Trek Phase 2. They had an episode where the planet, just the planet killers from Doomsday Machine, the same episode that had Matt Decker in it, Will Deckard's father. There's an alternate timeline where there's a bunch of these in the galaxy, and one of them destroys Vulcan. So that's Vulcan's destroyed there. Of course, they get it back. There's another fan film called Of Gods and Men, where it's the mirror universe Enterprise, or a ship from the mirror universe comes with some ultimate weapon, and they destroy Vulcan. And then in Star Trek 2009, of course, Nero destroys Vulcan.
Right.
So that follows the pattern from the hero's journey of the mentor dying.
Well, it's also, if you have the guide race, it could be Atlantis, and that goes back to Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Of sorts.
Yeah,
it's fun. And then,
apparently, perhaps even earlier, right? That's we get that from Plato, but apparently there was there may be an Egyptian reference to it as well.
Well, allegedly, all that comes from Plato. It says his ancestor Solon story, but his ancestor Solon was from 600 years ago, and he got it from Egyptian priests or something talking about it. So, I mean, I don't know if there's any independent Egyptian literature on it. Actually, I'm pretty sure there isn't, because Plato's is the earliest, and then there's two like Timaeus wrote about, and then someone else. And it's funny because in all of the stories, Atlantis lost one, if not two, wars. it's supposed to be so superior, but even in the ancient Greek, they had lost a war with a power to the east. Some people say it was the Persians. Some people say it was Hyperborea or the Vedic India, but Tartaria. It doesn't matter. I mean, it might if it really happened, but it doesn't matter for our purposes. And then the second war they lost was to the Athenians, which makes it seem less like gods losing to men and more like the British Empire losing to the 13 colonies.
Yeah, it sounds like the underdog got the upper hand.
Yeah. Or the student usurped it's decaying masters, whether it's because of decadence or just old age. Decay is decay, however you come by it. Yeah. So it's the in Joseph Campbell's version, it doesn't matter what causes the decay necessarily. The decay is the archetype. How you get there is just the story.
There you go.
Yeah. So okay. I think we hit some new things. Maybe hopefully some sparks for some videos for you in the future, which will be cool. Are there any other shows that you feel or properties that you feel even nearly as near and dear to Star Trek out there?
Well, I am a big Star Wars fan as well. Although
allowed to be both?
Yeah, I think so.
No one told me that.
I don't see why not.
I didn't get that
memo. Although I have to say that Star Wars was more of a child and teenage obsession. It hasn't really held with me as much as Star Trek. Maybe for obvious reasons. I don't know. I think it was more.
We can say it. The prequels and the sequels were all worse than everything except for the second half of Return of the Jedi, except for Rogue One, which was pretty good.
Yeah, Rogue One, I like that a lot, and I like The Mandalorian a lot too.
Oh yeah, I think some of the TV. Yeah, Mandalorian was a lot of fun. Boba Fett, not so much. And there's Andor. I like that a lot too.
We tried watching that. We watched the pilot and decided not to proceed with it. It just felt, I don't know.
It's good. It's a spark.
I heard. Yeah, I heard it's actually might be the best of the bunch, maybe from what I've heard, but
it could be. I don't know. The Mandalorian to me just has that. It has the wonder. It's got the samurai or gunslinger aspect of it, but it's also got your. It's got your Odyssey kind of thing where he's got a quest, but he keeps getting sidetracked, either by need or encumbrance, or he needs another piece. It's it's like a video game. You can't get to the end because you have to, you need some part here, but before you get to the part, you need to kill this monster, and before you kill this monster, you need to go to the homeworld and be forgiven, and there's always a side venture. So the Mandalorian is to me has it all, including good characters and including Katie Sackhoff, who I cast to be Captain Marvel, but she was Starbuck in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. Nobody listens to me, and she wasn't cast as Starbuck, but she's I forget her character's name, but she's the self-proclaimed queen by birthright of Mandalore, but there's nothing there. So she did, while she sort of despises the Mandalorian myths and fairy tales and their ways, she sort of has the skills, but even though she eschewed it, it sort of came to nothing. So, right now it's only episode 3 in season 3, and now it looks like she's turned face and is now helping our hero, but I'm not sure just yet.
I haven't checked the new season out. We were sort of waiting, I think, for it to kind of wrap up so we could watch it at our leisure instead of having to wait with bated breath for the next episode. But as far as I'm concerned, my opinion is that The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars since the original Star Wars movie. I think I like it even better than The Empire Strikes Back. I always really liked The Empire Strikes Back. I always felt it was like the best until the last time we watched it. My wife and I rewatched it a few years ago, and gosh, I just felt like, I don't know, it didn't hold up, at least at that time. Maybe if I rewatch it again, I'd have a different opinion now. But
you want to know the
after
problem?
Rewatching it,
Luke's the problem.
And the original, what do you think? Original Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back? Which one did you like better?
I mean, the original Star Wars is sort of like your perfect story. And while it's not particularly complex, that's fine. And it was 1977. I was 10, so or maybe younger. Yeah, probably younger. More than 68, so I was definitely younger, under 10. And it was terrific. And Empire was a tragedy. It ended sadly. So that's different. You didn't have movies that ended with a cliffhanger like that. So that was completely new. So to me, anyway. So I'm not, I think Empire was probably a better movie, but watching it over again and watching it as old, it's like Luke is completely unlikable, and and he's almost like the Adam Sandler character in Uncut Gems. Like by the end of that, I'm like, just please blow his head off already, and they blew his head off. I'm like, thank you, and that's not the emotion I'm supposed to get. I'm like,
it wasn't what they were going for.
I'm like, you're lucky Darth just cut off your hand. I mean. And then later on, it's supposed to be because Darth lost his hand, but then of course they ruined that in the prequels by having Darth lose all of his limbs, which was a really good scene in all of those movies. But still, I mean, it changed the whole symbology of him having his hand cut off. I mean, the whole thing was the sins of the father are visited on the son. So anyway,
I feel like George Lucas should have rewatched his original movies before he wrote his prequels, because it seems like everything they had established as the history of Star Wars in the original movies, he completely changed in the prequels.
Yes,
it was just weird.
By the way, I hated Obi-Wan. Hated it. Every part of it. I mean, from the fact that Leia had never met Obi-Wan before. Now, she forgot this gigantic epic adventure of her childhood. I mean, and then the fact he's trying to be undercover and he's talking like the most patrician nobleman of all, whereas on like minor planets, he's like, "Ew, Stormtrooper, please ignore us and forgive." And he's trying to fit in. It's like it's like the King of England trying to hang out in like port bars or something. It's like, come on, like try. You're an actor. Try.
Yeah, I didn't see Obi-Wan. I haven't watched.
I'm telling you, and the only thing that comes out of Obi-Wan is that the Darth Vader looks like a complete dummy as well. There's like a million times he could kill everyone, and he doesn't for reasons and sometimes not reasons. I mean,
for plot,
or lack thereof, just because the characters need to live to advance it. It's just, I mean, they made one of the most iconic villains, if not the most iconic villain in cinema history, look like a dummy. And
that's too bad.
Yeah, and I don't want that at all. And that's before he had some torn sympathy for his son, and there was no illusion that he knew that Leia was his daughter at the time. Though you think that he'd be able to sense that, but there was, I don't recall there being any allusion to that. Not that I would watch it the second time. Anyway, I hated Obi-Wan. There are people who like it, but that's not that's you haven't seen it, and that's not the show. But I have to say, definitely you have proved yourself as Meta Trek. This is definitely Meta Trek. It seems like we can apply meta to a lot of things, but I think Trek is just such a rich tapestry of so many different shows, so many different years, so many different movies, other properties, as you mentioned, the cartoon, the comic books, fan fiction, and some of which has been allowed to be sort of semi-canon, almost like the Dark Tower, which is...
Yeah, canon's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me butting in on that.
You're the guest.
And I want to do a video on canon someday. And because for there to be a canon, there has to be an apocrypha. There has to be, there's certain things that are allowed into the canon, and then the rest of it is considered apocryphal. And what you find in the apocrypha, any apocrypha, is often you'll find bits of the mythology that's lacking or missing in the canon. So the apocrypha can be just as important as the canon. And a lot of people dismiss things that are apocryphal, but I feel that there's a lot of importance there. Again, like I mentioned before about the planet Vulcan being destroyed. They became the mentors, and then they had to die, and that was first brought up in 2 apocryphal films, and maybe Abram had even seen those and got the idea from them to put it in his movie, perhaps. But yeah, there's a lot of important things to be found. Like if you read the Christian apocrypha, you'll find some real important mythological aspects to the life of Christ that is missing from the Gospels.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's also the book, the 3 books of Enoch and Jubilees, and the Gospels from several of the apostles, and also including Mary. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I did a show on the Apocrypha with a former Mormon minister, so that was really cool as well. And
you say you are a foreman?
Oh, no, my guest was.
No. Oh, your guest. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's actually been on 5 times, and hopefully coming on 6 to do a proper show on Atlantis.
Interesting.
But yeah. He did the Norse mythology show as well. Chris Ames. Hi, Chris. And even though this show probably won't come out until much later, congratulations on your big test. So we're recording this March, what is it, the 18th or the 16th? It's the 16th. Anyway,
16th.
Yeah, the show probably won't come out for several weeks, if not several months. I'm sort of binging on recordings while I'm solo. The audience knows that La Sicaria is down doing the Sicaria things, and so gotta keep myself busy, right? I gotta keep myself off the streets and anything from grocery shopping. I'll order Chinese for like a family of 4 just for me, and just eat it like 3 meals a day for a week. Yeah. I'm 54 and I'm still basically a 20-year-old. So there you go. Anyway, I can't thank you enough. So interesting. Please tell the folks where they can find your stuff, how they can support you, and what they should subscribe to, etc., etc. Sure.
Well, my main channel is my YouTube channel. So that's at youtube.com/Metatrek. And I have an Instagram page as well. So that's at Metatrek Videos. And you can support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Metatrek. If you join me there, you'll get exclusive, deeper content. So I take my content to a deeper level on Patreon than I do on YouTube. I kind of feel it's like more like an inner sanctum and for the initiated. And when I reach my goal of getting so much per month, I'll be able to start producing more content. So if you are interested and want to help support me, that would be awesome.
Do you have 33 levels like the Masons?
There are. Yes, there's a $3, a $9, and an $18
excellent
level. Yep.
Very, very, very Kabbalist there as well. So prime numbers, all prime numbers.
Oh yeah, intentionally.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Those are terrific numbers. All right. Well, everyone, you heard them. Was there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't get to that I didn't give you a chance to?
Oh, there's about a dozen things. So we'll have to, hopefully maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all sorts of things that we never actually got a chance to get into.
All right. Well, listen, when you get a chance, shoot me a list and we'll figure out a time to reconvene.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. And thank you all for listening to Garden of Doom. Certainly check out Metatrek and subscribe and check it out. And if you're able, support them at one of those Patreon levels. $3 a month certainly isn't bad. As for me, I just ask you to subscribe and give a 5-star rating and maybe write a nice review and, share the show with your friends, refer it, because the show is sort of genre defined. There's 1,000 shows out there that touch on things that I touch on, but I don't think there's any one show where you can just sort of get it all if you wait long enough or if you go back far enough in the catalog. So anyway, enough plugging of me about me. I'm still uncomfortable doing that. But thanks all for listening. And because Lasakari is not around, there's no outro, so just play whichever Star Trek theme you like the most in your head right now.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
Yes, live long and prosper.